standing.
All right, sounds good. Okay, so I'm gonna try and move a little faster than I have been and rely more on your questions than, describing every little detail of the track. But I say that to say the first thing is just to mention this track, and I think this track is really hard, and it's also really awesome. Like I feel like this is a great track to kind of gauge your progress. So I noticed like now I've been hot lapping, and since we were here last time, I'm a tenth or two quicker than I was, which is great. So it shows that I'm improving. The other thing is it's a ton of fun to hot lap because if you make a mistake, it's only 1 minute. Whereas, other tracks, like you make one tiny mistake and there's a long straight and you lose a half second, and then it takes 3 minutes before you can start another lap. So this is just a great practice track. As for racing, you're going to find the faster you get, the more you'll enjoy racing here, only because you start higher up and then no one can pass you because it's a really hard track to pass anyone on. So your qualifying is basically going to determine your finish order on this track.
If you stick to the track.
So yeah, this is last someone had mentioned, so we did this in August and it was in late afternoon. I think we're about 1.2 seconds slower doing it in the afternoon. So if you're comparing your times to what you did last time, that's not a good way to compare. Just focus on what you're doing this time, or maybe take the time you had last time, add 1.2 seconds, and see if you're close.
Thank you. That makes me feel so much better.
Okay, for turn one, I turn from just a couple feet after the end of the green wall, and I turn pretty hard. You should be in fifth gear, and you're going to want to keep the gas mashed. Maybe not at first if you're having difficulties with spinning out. Here, go ahead and lift before you turn in, but eventually you should be able to keep the gas held as you turn in. Right about here, where when you're going full speed, you can kind of see there's a grade change. Right about here, I let off the gas, and I aim to run over the curbing. I don't always get it because sometimes I don't turn in early enough, but this is the goal. And right after the curbing, I may give it a little break, but you want to wait just a little bit. To probably about right here to go ahead and start, and you want to ease onto the brakes, because if you don't have your wheel completely straight, which by the way, as you come through this turn, if you turn the wheel and brake or gas, you're going to spin out. So you want the wheel straight, you want to ease on the brakes, and it would be better for your race and everyone else around you if you keep the wheel straight. And if you brake all the way and into the dirt, well, that's fine. You can recover. Spinning out is going to cause a lot of chaos. So keep the wheel straight, brake. You should be able to stop before you get to the dirt. And you're going to continue going, and you'll keep slowing down. And the goal is to be slowed down right around the edge of this pavement. So you want to be slowed down enough that you feel comfortable turning in to turn two. And turn two, you can take a couple different ways. Really, for me, it depends on how I did on turn one. If I got slowed down too slow, then what I'm going to do is treat this as a double apex. I'm going to go for both edges, swinging out a little bit and swinging back in. If I'm too hot right here, I'm going to drift out a little and just treat it as one late apex. So let's pretend that I got too slow here. I'm going to come into the first corner and maybe give it a little throttle, swing out, and then come back into the second apex full throttle. And that's going to throw me all the way out to the curb here. If you aren't getting out to this curb, you're not getting on the gas early enough. You want to get thrown out to this curb.
What gear do you take that corner in? Initially, I was trying first, but I couldn't keep it under control. Second seems a lot more stable, but I think it's a tad slower.
Yeah, you definitely want to get all the way to first gear. Maybe in colder weather, second would be better. Now, all that being said, if second helps you keep the car stable, do what works. But I think the fast lap times are all going to be in first gear. Any other questions on T1, T2?
Go for it.
Okay, so we're accelerating up from first to second to third, and you could shift to fourth, but I don't find that I hit the rev limiter, so I don't. And right after the concrete starts on the left is when I'm going to start braking. And this is your typical hairpin curve. So in the Skippy, I find late apexes are great for these curves, at least for me. So I'm going to brake, and then I'm going to swing around, and I'm really going for a late apex here, so that I can be full throttle just after the apex and stay full throttle until the next turn. Sometimes I brush the brakes here, sometimes I don't. It all just depends on if you feel you have too much understeer or not.
Are you down to first there?
I am down to first here, and then I'm gonna leave in first, and you should get swung out all the way out here. Maybe you'll go a little wide and get a 1X, and then you're gonna power through to third gear for the next corner. All right, so I'm rolling. I get up to third gear for just a second, but just a split second. And then I'm going to, right about here, I'm going to start braking. I'm going to downshift to second. Now this curve is kind of weird. I feel like there's a couple of different ways you could take it, and I just kind of go with the flow of whatever I have. But my goal when I'm thinking about this corner is right here. When I start braking, I'm immediately looking at the apex, and my goal is to hit that apex. So that when you slide out from this apex, you lose huge chunks of time. So hitting the apex is probably a little more important than focusing on your speed and rotation and all that. But my goal is to see that apex, start braking, and then come up on this hill here and kind of brush the brakes. Like I start trail braking, and then I trail brake just enough to start sliding right here. You want a little slide / rotation, so that your car is already pointed in the right direction as you run over the kind of the inside of the curb. You don't want to hit where it slopes up, but you do want to hit the white part. And the moment you've got that rotation and you're here and you feel like the car is good and stable, then what's the word I'm looking for? A gentle acceleration. In the Skippy, we're all prone to just slamming the gas. But this is one of those corners where you want to feed it gas to stay with your traction level. If you are going pretty fast and you give it a lot of gas, you're going to spin out. So feed it gas as you deem appropriate, and you should get thrown out towards this white concrete. I don't usually have to use it. If I did, I probably made a mistake. But you get thrown out in the curb, and let the car go out. You know, if you keep the steering wheel too far over, you're going to start to slide out. So you definitely want to use all the track you have to keep that speed without, feeling like you're ice skating. Any questions on that turn? Cool. Let's keep going up to the bridge. This turn is challenging and super fun, especially when you get it right. As I'm climbing the hill, I've gotten the car from second back up to third. And right as I get up to the crest of the hill, I have a goal here, and that is to rotate the car, but to do it with mainly a throttle lift. And if you time the throttle lift with coming up over the curve here, or coming up over the crest in the road, excuse me, you can use the elevation change to kind of help throw the rear out a little more, and then you can get through this curve with zero braking. So I don't touch the brakes on this curb. I just start turning in and lift at the exact same time, that I'm hitting this elevation change, and that will help throw the rear out. And so I've lifted, the rear end's throwing out, and I'm still not back on the gas. I'm waiting, and right about where you see the dark tire marks in the curbing, I get back on the gas there. Sometimes before, sometimes after. You got to gauge based on how big a rotation you got out of your lift. And then once you feel that the car is stable and you can get back on the gas, you want to just slam on the gas and keep the car turned in. And that is going to throw you all the way out to your track out, which is out here on this white curbing. Now, you see my tires are all the way out here. With this car on this track, I'm running the SPO at 0. And the reason I do it is really starting in this section, I abuse the curbs. And I feel that I gain a lot more time than I lose. So yeah, if you are running like an SPO of 5, your car is going to be lower than mine, and when you hit this, it's going to scrape. And
Rookie question: what is that? SPO 5.
It's the spring perch offset. So the Skippy only has like tire pressure, spring perch offset, ARB, and brake balance. And so the SPO is determining basically, does the car set low or high? Okay. And when it sets lower, you can turn in better. When it sets higher, you can run over stuff.
Got it.
Cool.
So you set your SPO with what for this track?
For this track, I'm at 0.
0, okay.
So basically, in any track where you kill stuff, I go for 0. So here I'm trying to kill this curb. And if you had it on 5, what you would notice when you had the car where I have it is you'd hear a scraping noise and your steering would get more faint because you're bottoming out. Okay, so I've gotten thrown out from the last curb. I'm at my track out from the last apex, excuse me. I'm at the track out. I'm headed down, and on this particular corner, I find it better to do a little bit earlier braking, so that as we go down this blind turn, I can go down the blind turn without too much speed, and I can do a little braking if I want to get more rotation in the turn. But I like to brake right about here. I could get away with the braking later, but there's not a lot of room for error in recovery here. So I do a gentler brake, but earlier. And I start turning probably like right before the curbing ends. And then if the car is understeering and I don't feel like I can get up to the next apex, I might brush the brakes right about here to get a little extra rotation. And there's a 1X on my right. I don't know exactly what triggers it, but pretty much if you aim for where the concrete meets the curbing, the red and yellow curbing, you can get up onto the concrete without getting a 1X. And so again, that's my general goal with this higher SPO or lower. With an SPO of 0, I find I can get up on this curb. And so what I've done with the SPO of 0 is made the radius of this curb, of this whole section of the track, a lot larger. So the car may turn in a little slower, but it more than makes up for it by being able to get up on this curbing. And so my goal right now is probably right about here. On a really good lap, I can do it a little before here. I'm going to be able to get full throttle again, and I'm in 3rd gear at this point. And when I do that, it's going to throw me hard. It's a hairy section of the track. It's going to throw me out to my track out. And you can get a little grass here, but if you get too much, you're going to get a 1X. But your goal, if you haven't gotten a 1X here, you should definitely do it until you get one. There's just a lot of time in getting in the gas earlier.
When you go down from 4th to 3rd for that right kink, are you shifted down before you start your turn in?
I'm actually not going up to 4th. I'd never hit the rev limiter, so I just don't go up to 4th.
All right, cool. That's good enough.
So it's just a light tap of the brake and then turn in without shifting gears there, right?
Right. It's more than a light tap of the brake. It really, I guess, depends on how much speed you carried into the section, but you just need to get the car slowed up enough to get up on that concrete apex. All right, so I've gotten thrown out, but I didn't get the 1X. I'm floored in 3rd. I'm actually going to go up to 4th, probably about here, and keep it hammered in 4th. And then right about the start of the red and yellow curbing here, I am going to start a very gentle brake and a shift down to 3rd. And what I do for this corner is I try and stay really concerned about momentum. This corner is uphill, and the next section of the track is uphill. So your exit speed is super critical. The car doesn't have the horsepower to compensate for you overslowing. So, if I'm missing the apex, I may just miss the apex. Whereas I could have given it a little more brake and nailed the apex. It's just a lot more important to keep the momentum and lose 3 or 4 hundredths instead of 1 or 2 tenths because you broke too hard. So I'm going to brake to 3rd, and with some really light braking, I'm going to try and rotate the car. And I use about half of the concrete here. You can go all the way, but I feel like it throws you a little harder. So I use about half the concrete. And my goal is by the time I'm getting to where this red and yellow curbing is to be back on the gas. But again, it's more important to me to conserve the momentum than to get on the gas too early. So when I'm certain I'm not going to blow the exit, which I can really only do from experience, I get back on the gas. And this is also another corner on this track that rewards a gentle throttle input. So sometimes I can get away with a quick throttle input, but a lot of times a gentle throttle input will really help you conserve all the momentum without throwing the car all the way into the wall over here. And so another thing to note, you can use an awful lot of road out here. You can even get your left front tire over some of the dirt. Don't be afraid to use it. Because you really want to come off that corner with all the speed you can. And then for this section, just hit both the curbs. I just do it by feel. You may be able to memorize where a tree is or isn't, but the track is so short. You go run 10 laps and 20 laps. At some point, you'll just be able to hit both those curbs just naturally. And so for the final turn, my break point is obviously, or I shouldn't say obviously, but all your break points are earlier than they were last season. So this season, my break point is right before this this kind of dirt blob out in front of me is. I should probably have a better breakpoint for races because you can't see the dirt blob when another car's on top of it. But let me see, right about here. So yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do come races, but this is about where I break. And I'm going to go, I think you're in 5th. I'm going to go down to 2nd. And this is the turn here is so long you can't see the apex. So what I do is aim for, I think it's this one. Yeah, I aim for this white line in front of me. I aim to have my left wheel really close to the edge of it. If I'm too far over, that means I've gone too deep into the corner or I've gone too shallow, and so I can adjust from there. But this is kind of my first reference point, and then I'm going to head up for where the curbing doesn't have all of the tire marks on it. And my goal is to be on the gas right about here. And once you get on the gas, you don't want to slam the wall, but if you want to be able to hold the gas all the way. If you have to lift it all, you're going to kill the front straight. So you got on the gas too early. But you want to be able to get on the gas right about here. And with your SPO of 0, you can use the curbing if you want. I generally don't use all of it. But I hold and I get thrown out to the wall. And one of the main things with the wall is just don't be afraid of it or you're going to hit it. So realize it's there, but realize you can get really close to it and still not hit it. And then the last part of the track that's interesting is you're always entering pit lane, and that's okay. Don't worry about it. Just go ahead and drive through the finish line, and you won't get a flag or anything.
I have hit the wall several times with just the 0x, so I assume that's okay.
Yeah, you still may get some damage. I've hit a wall with 0x and had so much damage that the car was, slower each lap, and I've hit it and not known what's happened. So in a race, if you don't get a black meatball flag, it's almost always better to keep driving the race because the pit stop is going to add 16 seconds. So unless you're a full second a lap slower, just keep driving.
It's a kind of off-topic question, but that breakpoint for that last corner, that little dirt blob, everybody talks about that blob. I don't see it, and I've had people send me screenshots, and I can see it in the screenshot. I can't see it in my game. Does anybody know what graphic setting might be for that?
I'm on the same scenario. I don't see it either.
Probably that render dynamic track data or something like that.
I have render dynamic track data off, but I can see the dirt blob.
Well,
Yeah, I don't get it, because Johnny sent me a picture of the damn blob, and I'm like, oh yeah, I see it, but if I'm sitting in front of it, I can't see it on track, and I have almost everything fairly.
What's your shader quality set to?
Let me see.
Mine's on low.
yeah, I've got it high.
Yeah, mine's on high too. That's my
Where
only
is that
idea.
one? I think I have performance on max quality. I have pit objects and certain things turned off, but I think the track and everything I have as high as I can get it.
I will say I have seen weird stuff like shadows for me at Road America are not where they are for other people. So sometimes I've been unable to figure out what the difference is.
Could also just be monitor color settings as well.
I race in a Rift.
Well, never mind.
Well, maybe you can use this as an opportunity to find us all a breakpoint that isn't that blob.
I usually do I usually do like a second or two after that curbing ends. I think I brake a little bit later than I should through there.
Yeah, I would try using my my mid-turn reference point as a to see that mid-turn reference point I remembered from last season, and that's how I adjusted this season's further back. So it's a great way to figure out where you should start braking.
I did notice when you were stopped at that spot, like directly to the right, there's a red tent, a red like 4-pole tent. But I don't know how reliable it'll be to see that as you're driving past it. I'll have to try it out.
Yeah, let us know.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Any other questions?
No, just want to drive it. This is my first time in this track, so I'm trying to absorb as much as you said, but we'll see.
Could you give us a flying lap or two?
Yeah, I'll also throw out on YouTube. You can find Johnny's walkthrough from like April, and it even had the same weather settings, so you can get a different perspective on each corner.
That was
Well,
cool.
yeah, it